September 1st, 1939. Britain has been at war for less than 12 hours, and already the government has ordered every window in the country sealed against light. Not against bombs, against light. The Luftwaffe has not yet crossed the channel. No German aircraft has dropped a single explosive device on British soil. But in the darkness of that first blacked-out night, a man in London steps off a curb he cannot see and is struck by a car whose headlamps have been taped down to narrow slits. He dies on the pavement of a street no bomb will touch for another year. By the end of September 1939, 1,130 people are dead on British roads, roughly double the figure from September the year before. Pedestrians walk into canals. They fall off bridges. They are hit by buses, by trucks, by military vehicles whose drivers cannot see beyond the hood. The blackout regulations are enforced by ARP wardens who patrol the streets looking for any sliver of escaping light. The fine for a curtain gap is £2, about £130 in today's money. The penalty for stepping outside without a white armband or a newspaper tucked under your coat is that no one sees you coming and no one sees you fall. This is not the war you were taught. You grew up with the bombs, the blitz, the rubble and the searchlights, and all of that is true and all of that is coming. But the war that killed civilians did not wait for the Luftwaffe. It started with the things you could not see, could not taste, could not pick up off the ground without losing your hand. It started at home. If you had lived through it, here is what would have been trying to kill you. Not on some distant battlefield, in your kitchen, on your street, in the bread you were eating and the water coming out of your tap, and the shelter where you were told you would be safe. Start with what you were eating. In besieged Leningrad, by November 1941, the daily bread ration for a civilian dependent, someone not working in a factory, fell to 125 grams. That is roughly the weight of a bar of soap. But even that small dark block was not bread. Dmitry Pavlov, the man responsible for Leningrad's food supply, kept meticulous records of what went into it. 50 to 60% rye flour. The rest was cellulose, which is processed wood pulp. Cottonseed oil cake. Dust swept from the floors of flour mills. In some bakeries, wallpaper paste scraped from apartment walls because the paste contained residual starch. You held it in your hand and it looked like bread, and you told yourself you had eaten. But the caloric content was a fraction of what the weight suggested. Medical researchers would later describe this as hidden starvation, a condition where visible food intake masks a nutritional deficit so profound that the immune system collapses. Infections become lethal, and cognitive function degrades until you make the kind of mistakes that kill you in a city under siege. In Germany by 1944, war bread incorporated potato flour, rye bran, ground sugar beets, barley husks. In the occupied Netherlands during the Hunger Winter of 1944 to 1945, official rations fell to 400 calories a day. 20,000 Dutch civilians starved to death. People ate tulip bulbs. The bread was not bread. The ration was not a ration. And you could not tell by looking. Now consider the water. When a high-explosive bomb cratered a city street, the blast did not simply destroy the buildings above. It severed everything running beneath. Water mains, sewage pipes, gas lines. The drinking water mixed with raw sewage in the broken pipe network, and no one could see it. After Operation Gomorrah hit Hamburg in the summer of 1943, the city's water system largely collapsed. Dysentery and typhoid followed. The same pattern repeated in Cologne, in Berlin, in any city that took sustained bombing. In Coventry, after the raid of November 14, 1940, emergency water had to be trucked in for days. But boiling water required fuel, and fuel was rationed. So you drank what came out of the tap, and you did not know what was in it until your body told you, days later, by which point the bacteria had already done its work. The bomb did not need to hit your house. It just needed to hit your street. And then there were the objects on the ground. The German SD-2, officially designated Sprengbomb Dickwandig 2 kilogram, was a small anti-personnel submunition dropped in clusters from canisters. When released, hinged metal wings spun open to slow its descent, and from below, it looked like a leaf falling or a butterfly. That was the point. It was designed to arm on impact, but many carried a delayed or anti-disturbance fuse. They landed in gardens and on sidewalks and in fields. They looked like nothing dangerous, and when you picked one up, it detonated. Children were the most vulnerable. A small winged metal object in a garden looked enough like a toy. During the Baedeker raids of 1942 and other Luftwaffe operations over British towns, thousands of butterfly bombs were scattered across civilian neighborhoods. Bomb disposal units in Lincolnshire were still finding them years after the raids ended. The weapon's purpose was not simply to kill, it was to make you afraid of every unfamiliar object on your own street, to deny you the ability to walk through your own neighborhood after a raid without wondering whether the next thing you stepped on would take your legs. But the thing on the ground was not always a bomb. Children across Britain collected shrapnel after raids, trading fragments in schoolyards like marbles. Most pieces were inert metal. Some were not. Incendiary bomb components containing magnesium or white phosphorus that had failed to fully ignite looked like debris. White phosphorus burns on contact with skin and reignites when exposed to air, even after treatment. Hot shell fragments cause deep burns and jagged lacerations prone to infection. And here is the detail that seals it. Penicillin was reserved almost exclusively for military use until 1944. A child with an infected cut from a piece of metal picked up in a garden could die of an infection that a soldier on the front line would survive. If you are a parent or a grandparent, sit with that for a moment. Now go inside. You are in your shelter. The air raid siren has sounded, and you have done what the government told you to do. Descended into the basement, the converted cellar, the public Luftschutzkeller with its reinforced ceiling. You are following the rules. You are being safe. But the shelter was designed to protect you from blast and fragmentation. It was not designed for what happened in Hamburg on the night of July 27, 1943. The fires above were not a large fire. They were a firestorm, a self-sustaining atmospheric phenomenon in which the intense heat of mass urban burning created an updraft so powerful that it pulled surrounding air inward at ground level at speeds exceeding 150 miles per hour. Hurricane force. People fleeing on foot were physically dragged toward the center of the fire. Those who fell could not get up against the wind. The asphalt on the streets melted, and people stepped into it and could not pull free. Survivors described others swimming in liquid asphalt. The canals that people fled to for safety were heated by the surrounding inferno until the water approached boiling. Inside the sealed basement shelters, the fire consumed the oxygen above and generated carbon monoxide that seeped downward. Recovery teams who entered Hamburg's shelters afterward found the occupants seated upright, apparently at peace. They had not burned. They had not been hit by anything. They had suffocated quietly in the place they had been told was safe. 37,000 civilians died in the Hamburg firestorm over 10 days of raids. And in Britain, where the shelters were different, but the danger was real, the Bethnal Green Tube disaster of March 3, 1943, killed 173 people in a crowd crush on the station stairs. An anti-aircraft battery nearby fired a new type of rocket. The unfamiliar sound panicked civilians surging into the entrance. They fell, and the people behind them could not stop. No bomb fell. No German plane was overhead. The government suppressed the real cause for the rest of the war. The shelter was safety. The shelter was also a sealed room, a crush point, a place where the air could run out. Now come back above ground. The all clear has sounded. The planes are gone. But roughly 10 to 15% of all bombs dropped during the war failed to detonate on impact. Some were manufacturing defects. Some were deliberate. German Type 17 and Type 50 delayed action fuses were specifically engineered to explode hours or days after landing, timed to kill the rescue workers and the civilians who emerged after the raid thinking it was over. At the height of the Blitz, more than 3,000 unexploded bombs sat beneath British streets simultaneously, each one holding a neighborhood hostage. Rope barriers went up, hand-painted signs reading, "Danger, unexploded bomb," and civilians stood behind the cordon looking at their own front doors, unable to go in, unable to do anything but wait while a bomb disposal officer walked toward the thing buried in their garden. The all clear meant the planes had left. It did not mean the bombs were finished. Perhaps you survived all of this. The darkness, the starvation bread, the poisoned water, the butterfly bomb you did not pick up, the shelter that did not suffocate you, the unexploded bomb that a young royal engineer defused before it took your house. You survived because you were careful, because you followed the rules, because you were lucky. But there is one danger you cannot see, cannot hear, cannot defend against, with blackout curtains or a shelter or a ration book. Your neighbor. In Nazi Germany, the Blockwart system placed a party-appointed warden in every residential block of 40 to 60 households. Robert Galately spent years in Gestapo files from Würzburg and Dusseldorf, and what he found overturned assumptions about how the Nazi surveillance state actually functioned. The majority of Gestapo investigations were not initiated by state surveillance. They were initiated by voluntary denunciations from ordinary civilians, neighbors, colleagues, family members. The motives were not always ideological. Jealously documented cases triggered by property disputes, romantic jealousy, inheritance conflicts. A word said at the dinner table, a remark in a bread queue, a joke about the regime overheard by someone who had a grudge. A denunciation for defeatist remarks could result in arrest, concentration camp, execution, particularly after 1943 when the penalties tightened. In occupied France, an estimated 3 to 5 million denunciation letters were sent to German authorities or Vichy police during the occupation. Many were anonymous. André Halimi's research compiled them, and the letters are staggering in their banality. A neighbor reported for owning a radio. A woman reported for speaking favorably about the English. A family reported because the letter writer claimed the authorities had overlooked a Jewish grandparent. In the Soviet Union, communal apartment living meant families shared kitchens and bathrooms with strangers. And the logic of denunciation was even starker. Denounce before you are denounced. The NKVD did not need to find you. Someone in your kitchen already knew your name. The Gestapo was a surprisingly small organization. It did not need to be large. It had the population. If you have made it this far, if you are still alive in this imagined week, there is one more thing. You are working. The war economy has put you in a factory because every adult who can stand is needed. If you are a woman in a British munitions plant, you are filling artillery shells with TNT. Within weeks, your skin turns yellow, your hands, your face. The workers call themselves canary girls. Supervisors tell you the discoloration is harmless. It is not. TNT absorbs through the skin and attacks the liver. It causes jaundice, anemia, and in severe cases, aplastic anemia, which is fatal. When a colleague becomes seriously ill, She is moved to a different section of the factory. She is not given medical leave. She is not told what is killing her. The factory that built the weapons to win the war was poisoning the women who built them. And in your home at night, the blackout curtains that hide you from the bombers hang inches from the candle you're using because the electricity is unreliable. Inches from the coal fire in the small grate that heats the room. House fires surged during the blackout years. Fire brigades operated under the same blackout restrictions: no headlamps, no streetlights, locating a house fire only by the glow visible against the black sky. In working-class terraces with shared walls, a fire in one home consumed an entire row before help could arrive. The blackout hid you from the enemy above. It put you within arm's reach of a fire below. If you had children, the government offered you a choice. Operation Pied Piper, September 1939, evacuated approximately 1.5 million people, primarily children, from cities to the countryside. The process was chaotic. Children were assigned to host families with minimal vetting. The historical record includes accounts of extraordinary kindness. It also includes documented cases of physical abuse, sexual abuse, malnutrition, and severe neglect. Many working-class children arrived in rural areas with lice and no shoes. And some host families responded not with compassion, but with contempt. Some parents, learning what was happening, recalled their children to the cities, where the bombs were now falling. Leave your child with a stranger who might harm them, or keep your child at home where a bomb might kill them. Both options carried documented mortality. Did your grandfather serve? Did your grandmother work in a factory, or stand in a ration queue, or sew blackout curtains to every window in the house? If someone in your family lived through this war, not on a battlefield, but at a kitchen table, tell us who they were. Tell us what they carried. The comment section is open, and these are the stories that disappear when no one asks. There is one more image. The British government issued gas masks to the entire civilian population in 1938, including a specialized device for infants, a rubberized canvas bag that enclosed the entire baby with a clear window panel, and a hand-operated bellows pump on the side. A parent had to continuously pump the bellows to push filtered air into the sealed bag. If the parent was injured, if the parent was knocked unconscious, if the parent was separated from the child during a raid. The infant inside the sealed bag suffocated. Testing revealed that many parents could not maintain the pumping rhythm under stress. The design required you to keep calm, keep pumping, keep your hand moving steadily on the bellows while the bombs fell outside. The device meant to save your child from gas could kill your child if you stopped. Large-scale chemical attacks on British cities never came. The gas masks were never needed, but they were carried every day by millions of people. A rubber-scented reminder slung over every shoulder on every street that the war had reached into the nursery and turned even the act of protecting an infant into something that required mechanical precision under fire. This is what the home front was. Not the opposite of the battlefield. A different kind of battlefield, where the enemies were darkness and hunger and contaminated water and small metal objects in the garden, and the neighbor who knew your name, and the shelter that sealed shut, and the factory that turned your skin yellow, and the curtain that caught fire, and the choice no parent should have to make. The phrase, "safe at home," did not survive contact with the Second World War. Nowhere was safe. Nothing was routine. The ordinary acts of a single day, drawing water, eating bread, walking to work, picking something up off the ground, trusting the person next to you, each one carried a specific, documented way to die. The records survive. The ration books, the ARP warden logs, the Gestapo files, the bread formulas, the bomb disposal reports, the munitions workers' medical records, the evacuation placement files. They survive because someone wrote them down, and because the war that killed more civilians than soldiers was not fought in some abstract theater of grand strategy. It was fought in kitchens and cellars and bread queues and factory floors by people whose names we have, whose choices we can trace, whose ordinary weeks contained more ways to die than most of us will face in a lifetime. If this is the kind of history that matters to you, the specific kind, the kind that trusts you with what actually happened, subscribe. There is more to document, and the generation that lived it is nearly gone. What we preserve now is what survives. The next time you flip a light switch without thinking, remember that for 6 years, across an entire continent, that small act could summon a fine, a warden's whistle, or a bomb. The next time you turn on a tap, remember Hamburg. The next time you pick something up off the ground without looking at it closely, remember the butterfly. It looked harmless. That was the design.